let some people join in here. Hi, everybody. Looks like we got about 50 people in here. Just give it a minute or so. Thank y'all for joining in. It's going to be a wild ride. All right. I think we're good to start. Okay, so my name is Grant. Y'all might have seen me on a webinar before. I'm the sales manager here at Thunder Laser USA. I've got Chris here with me. Chris, you want to tell them who you are and what you do here?
Yep, I am one of the techs and support team members, and I also do a lot of the samples and demos here at my facility in Land O'Lakes, Florida.
Yeah, if you buy a machine, you will probably talk to Chris at some point, getting support or doing your one-on-one training if you get a Nova Series machine. But yeah, I'm going to jump into what we're expecting out of this and a few questions to start off with before we start demoing the machine. But yeah, our expectations for this is our very first live demo. So bear with us if there's some hiccups along the way. The expectations are you're going to see the machine live in action, and you're going to be able to ask questions real time and get answers by myself, and some of our other employees are going to be in the chat answering things. So Chris, my first question to you is, what is the Nova Series? Because like you see right now, Chris is right next to a Nova 63 130 watt. That's what we're demoing. Chris, tell us about a Nova Series and what it encompasses.
Sure. The Nova Series is kind of our flagship and our tank series. It is a glass CO2, liquid cooled, and comes in a multiple of sizes. So we have the 24 Nova, we have the Nova 35, we have the Nova 51, and the 63, and those are just changing the dimensions of the bed size. And we also have a 60 to 130 watt, depending on what size you're getting. But it is our workhorse. It is a beast of a machine.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that, so the Nova that you pick will depend on the size of the materials you want to work on. So like Chris said, the bed size is determined by the number of machines. So the Nova 35 is a 35 by 24-inch bed. 51 would be 51 by 35. So bed size is one determining factor of what machine you get. Also wattage. The thing to think about with wattage is as you increase your wattage, you can cut thicker and you can cut faster. The next question is, what is included with the Nova Series machine?
Everything that you need except for 2 gallons of distilled water and a computer to run the software. We do provide the software, but everything comes with it. So you have an air pump, you have a chiller, you have your exhaust fan, everything that you need to start up and go. Besides those 2 things, the water and the computer.
Yep. So everything comes in the crate that you need to get the machine up and running and do a standard job. The only things that do not come with it, aside from what Chris has already said, would be the optional accessories. So like a rotary, camera, different heads and lenses, those would be additional, but you don't need those in order to use the machine.
Correct. Yeah, those are all going to be add-ons. Depending on, not everybody needs a rotary. Not everybody needs the 4-inch head. So those are optional accessories.
And who is a Nova Series machine best for?
I mean, it does so many different things. We have people that are cutting airplane insulation panels. We also have grandma cutting earrings out of acrylic or wood. So it really depends. It fits so many different purposes. From cutting acrylic to engraving trophies, crystal or acrylic trophies. So there's a wide range of demographics that this fits.
Yeah, that kind of plays into the type of machine that it is. It's a CO2 laser, and a CO2 laser, in my opinion, is the most versatile. You can cut and engrave wood, acrylic, leather, fabric, you name it. The limitations are very little. Like you can't cut and engrave metal, but you can engrave on coated metals. You can remove the coating. So if it were me and I was starting a laser business, a CO2 would be the way to go to give yourself the most versatility with the products that you can make.
Yeah, this is the CO2 laser, like the Nova series, is definitely the gateway drug that gets you in the door and started. And then, as you build up an engraving company, that's when you start to expand into fiber lasers and RF lasers and stuff like that, UV lasers, all of which we carry.
A very good point. If you did a 360 with your camera, everybody would be able to see the different kind of machines you have. So the Nova is a gateway drug. You don't have to do it. It's all good.
I can.
All right.
Not a big deal.
So guys, we've got a chat section and a Q&A section. So any questions that y'all have, drop them in the Q&A section for me, if you don't mind. What Chris is going to do here is he's going to start using the laser machine, kind of talking through what it is he's doing. And while he's doing that, I can answer questions in the Q&A. So like we said earlier, Chris has a Nova 63 130 watt. He's going to be cutting and engraving on wood. He's going to cut an acrylic keychain out of blue, yellow, and white acrylic and then piece it together, I guess. We didn't talk about that part. But also, he's going to engrave a tumbler to show y'all how the rotary works.
Yeah, and real quick, what we're doing is I have 3 different pieces of acrylic set up, and I kind of have it programmed to go to each piece and cut out the pieces that I need. But what I'm going to end up with is a small little keychain. And the cuts are so fine and so adjustable that I can, without glue, have them interlay inside of each other, which is pretty neat. But it's already set up, and I guess, Grant, I could probably just go ahead and get this started. And I'm going to frame it out real quick just to make sure I do know what I'm doing. And I will move, I'll get it started, and I'll move the camera in so we can see it going. Now, it is going to be running without the lid shut. This is bypassed for this purpose of showing everybody what's going on and getting good angles into the machine. But typically our safeties are on, and you cannot operate the machine with it open like this.
All right,
Yeah,
you're good to
While
go
I'm doing
ahead.
that, you go ahead.
I'm going to start going through some of these questions here. Does the Nova 24 require a table or cart? Not necessarily. I've seen people use them just setting them on the ground, but I'll tell you, you will want a stand. If you just put it on the ground, you're going to have to bend all the way down or possibly even get on your knees. So a lot of our customers will build their own. In fact, we've got an article in our knowledge base that has a blueprint for building your own, but you can also buy one from, I think Husky might sell something like that, or Uline. But in that article that I'm referring to, there's links where you can buy some. How often do you change the coolant fluid on the 63 and 130 watt? I assume you're talking about antifreeze, and that I've never used myself. So Chris, do you have a take on it?
Yeah, the recommendations is quite frequent, but our recommendations kind of as a tech team is keep an eye on it. We don't want any algae buildup. We don't want any floaters, white floaters of any type of debris in there. That will limit the cooling capabilities of the liquids that are in there. And they could even get stuck on the tube in the channels of the glass tube, really limiting the cooling potential and could even crack the tube from hot spots. That said, keeping an eye on it, making sure there is no algae, but maybe 60 every 3 months or so, quarterly, have it on your schedule to cycle it and inspect it. But I would definitely follow our periodic maintenance guidelines to double check as well.
Yep. So you already cut all those. How long did that job take?
That took a total of 1 minute and 24 seconds, and I made three different keychains. The only issue is going to be I have to put them together now.
Well, I've got more questions. Do you have an air purification system for someone who is unable to vent a machine? So we do not sell a fume extractor ourselves, but we're partnered with FilterBox, who does sell them, and they specialize in making fume extractors and that type of equipment. So if you have a question about that or would like more information, email our sales email, and we'll send you everything that we have about FilterBox. And I think the Peck that the rep that we use over there, his name is Peck, so we can send you his email, his phone number, and you can get with him. All right. And thank you, Myers, for answering that question in the chat. is a 100 watt too powerful for cardstock? Is that a matter of setting the power and speed? So I use a 100 watt here at our location, and I've actually cut and engraved black cardstock myself and had zero issues with it. So I would not say a 100 watt is overkill. Do you need a 100 watt to do that? No, but you can easily get that job done with a 100 watt.
I'll tell you what, these machines still amaze me with the size of the cut beam. I'm having such a hard time getting these in there, and like I said, I can do this without glue because the kerf or the cut size of the beam is so tight that they just kind of press in, which is really cool to be able to make that on the fly, you know, for kids or for ornaments or whatever you're making.
Awesome.
I'm going to move this acrylic out of the way, and we'll pull the wood in and show what engraving and cutting out on the wood looks like as well.
All right, so what is the maximum cutting depth for the 100 watt Nova 51? Generally, we say the 100 watt can cut up to about a ½ inch. Of course, it's going to vary depending on what material we're referring to and also the quality of the material. I've cut up to 3/4 inch, even a full inch of acrylic on my 100 watt. But if I get some really poor quality, let's say birch plywood that has a lot of glue and a lot of layers, that's a 1/4 inch, it may struggle with that. So it does vary, but as you increase your wattage, you can cut thicker and you can cut faster. Best setting for cutting 1/8 inch black acrylic so the edge is smooth. That's going to depend on what wattage machine you have, but through the testing that I've done, going slower with your cuts and using less air keeps the edge as smooth as it can get.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes from, you know, in the past it wasn't possible. So what you would do would be heat treat the edges with a blowtorch or something like that. We can replicate that with these lasers, especially since we have an adjustable air system. Let me actually pull the camera real quick. Since we can adjust the air on the fly, I keep these open. I don't lock them down depending on what I'm doing with the machine. I can actually give myself more air or less air while it's running. And you know, you want that flame polished edge on acrylic, you can easily adjust it down to get that and limit your flames. Where when you're cutting, you want more air, you know, and you can adjust that on the fly on these, which is an option most companies don't have.
I just realized how dirty your bed is. You've used the heck out of that machine.
It's not that bad.
Yeah. All right. When should I not use air assist? Kind of piggybacking what Chris just said, he showed the dual stage air assist that comes on the Nova series machine. So you have high air and low air, and you can adjust both of them on the fly. It's very rare to not ever use air. Actually, I always have air on. I just limit how much is coming out. So if I want very minimum air, I have just enough positive pressure in the head to keep the smoke from coming back into the nozzle and touching the lens and getting it dirty. So if I'm engraving on acrylic or wood, if I'm engraving in general, I'm running on very low air. But like I said, just enough to keep positive pressure.
Yeah, we don't ever want zero air. Very, very rare with this type of a head setup and design to have zero air. We're cooling the lens as well as stopping any type of fumes, smoke, and debris from going back onto the lens. So that's part of it, and then you're also stopping flame up and things like that. All right, we are focused in. Let me frame it out again, make sure we're good.
So Chris is going to run through these different jobs, and when he's done, I have a few other questions I'm going to ask him to point out some features. So don't think that when we get done with these jobs that we're done, I still have some questions for him. What is the max power for the Nova 24? A 60 watt is the only size laser tube that we sell on the 24. We don't have any other options on that one. I am mainly cutting a 1/4 inch of MDF. What laser would be the one I should look at? Well, you could cut a 1/4 inch of MDF on almost any of our CO2 machines. However, the higher your wattage, like I said earlier, the thicker you can cut and the faster you can cut. So let's say that you're looking at the Nova 24 and you're looking at the 3580 watt. Well, being at the Nova 24 has a 60 watt, the 35 has an 80 watt. The 80 watt would be able to cut that 1/4 inch MDF faster than the Nova 24. MDF is also one of the harder materials to cut. It's very inconsistent due to the density and like the buildup and the makeup of the material. So I would caution more on having more wattage.
Grant, I wanted to catch it as it switched. So one of the features on our machine is that we do have 2-stage air assist, and within Lightburn we can tell it to turn on the low or the high volume. So during my engraving, I used the low volume air, and as soon as it switched over to cut, it was set to automatically switch, which is also another feature that isn't really available on other machines.
Yeah, and you'll probably notice that the air shut off after a set amount of time. Another great feature about our machine is after X amount of time, I think you can set it and control how much time it is, but let's say after 30 seconds, the air assist will turn off and the exhaust fan will turn off. That way you're not consistently using power and pulling AC out of your room. What lens are you using? He is using the 2-inch head and 2-inch lens.
Correct. Yeah, and just to demonstrate how good's our view there. Not bad. You can see everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can I get a little closer or no? We're good? So I'm going to lower the bed real quick, and just to show you the ease of swapping lenses, this is our 4-inch lens, also dirty because it does get used. We release our air hose, undo our brass knob that holds in the lens, put in the new lens, and put in our air hose, and I'm done. That's as quick as a lens swap you'll ever have. Very, very simple, very easy, easy to swap out for different jobs and cutting different types of materials.
While we're on that, let's kind of speak to some of the reasons why you'd want a 4-inch or an HR head. The 4-inch head is used mainly for cutting thicker materials. For instance, if you wanted to cut something that's 1/2 inch or thicker, that head and that lens would do a better job because it elongates how far the beam will travel. There's probably a better way to say that, but the 2-inch lens, say it will only travel this far, but the 4-inch lens can travel that far. So if you're working on something thicker, the 4-inch gives you the best chance to cut all the way through it. This is also true with cutting foam. A lot of foam that people are cutting is like 1 inch or 2 thick, so the 4-inch head would be best for it. But another use out of the 4-inch head is engraving on things that are curved. So like I remember in October, Chris engraved a pumpkin. It's obviously
Yep.
too big to put on a rotary. So he was using the 4-inch head to account for some of the curve in the pumpkin since the beam can travel further. You'll also notice that a lot of people are using the 4-inch for the Stanley Cups when they're doing a full wrap, because the Stanley Cup, when you're doing a full wrap, it's wider on one end and then more narrow on the other. And having that difference in height from the laser head, the 4-inch accounts for that.
How are we looking on time? Should I get set up for the rotary?
Oh yeah, we got plenty of time.
Okay, good.
So the HR head is used for engraving high resolution photos, or another good example would be like really fine lettering. So you can engrave up to 1000 DPI with the HR head, whereas with the standard 2-inch head, you can engrave up to 500 DPI. So if you plan on engraving photos or really small lettering or logos, the HR head is going to give you the most fine resolution.
All right, and I guess want to maybe talk about the different style rotaries we have, but this is our full-size RotoBoss. It does have adjustments on both the motorized side and the free spin side, so you can move things up and down to get them level. And one of the other options that we have, part of our kind of our automation system, is that a lot of other machines, you have to unplug one of the accesses to use your rotary. Well, we have an alternate driver, and we also have a switching system that is built into the laser. When we plug it in, it automatically knows that the rotary is there. There's no huge workflow process, cutting time down in switching to Rotary. I literally put it in there, I'm going to plug it in, and then I'm going to load my cup and my graphic, and I'm done. I'm ready to go.
And for those of you who don't know, a rotary is used to engrave basically anything cylindrical. So like cups, bottles, glasses, baseball bats, uh, dowels, really anything you can think of that's cylindrical, you'd want to use a rotary to be able to engrave all the way around it. Chris mentioned that we have different rotary options. So this one right here is the Rotoboss. It's the more expensive one. It's $1,400. Another option is the Junior, which is $1,100. The main difference is exactly what Chris was talking about. You can see on this Rotoboss that it's got the two vertical towers where you can raise and lower both ends of the cup, whereas the Junior only has one of those. So Chris, could you give us an example of why, or just speak to why you would want dual adjustment versus just having a single adjustment that the Junior has?
Yeah, if you're doing wine glasses or some of these complicated shapes, urns for funeral remains, if you were doing any of that stuff, you can really use the two-sided adjustments to get things level. We want it level so that we can engrave on the entire piece correctly. We want to try to stay in focus with the lens on this material. So we're trying to get these focused or leveled out so that the distance between the lens and our tumbler or whatever other material we're using here is flat. And I'm just going to make a couple of adjustments to make sure that it is.
Yeah, so the dual adjustments allows for you to engrave on odd shaped items that maybe you couldn't do on the Junior. Also, for just regular shaped items like a Yeti tumbler, for instance, it's just easier to use the Rotoboss having the dual adjustments. There are times where with the Junior, you max out the height adjustment and it's still not level. So you'd have to slide a piece of like wood or some material under the other end to like raise it or lower it. Whereas the Rotoboss, you just have two vertical adjustments. You don't have to jerry rig it, for the term that I'll use. Lori says, how much are they? It's a good question. So we have a Nova 24, 35, 51, and 63. There's different wattage options on some of those, but the Nova 24 is the lowest priced one, and it's $7,400. And Chris has a 63 130 watt, which is the most expensive option, and it is 16,300. So that's the range, 7,400 to 16,300. I know that's a pretty big gap, but you'll just have to pick the machine that is best for the size items that you want to work on and also the thickness of material you want to cut. Which leads me to, if you have any questions or if you want to speak to somebody, you can always schedule a call with a sales rep on our website, or I have our sales at email posted at the top of the chat. So email us or call us or schedule a call, whatever works best for you.
And I'm just setting up the graphic so it is ready to go. I'm sending over a different graphic than we were using, and that's the reason.
Jamie asked, how do I set up and do a hands-on training with Chris? So we don't currently offer in-person training. However, we do offer remote training sessions. Of course, if you buy a Nova Series machine, it comes with 1 free hour of training, but you can purchase additional hours if you need at $100 an hour. And those additional hours of training can be over anything and everything that you want. So if you get a job request from a customer that's wanting you to engrave photos on wood, then you can schedule your 1 hour training with Chris to be specifically over engraving photos on wood. And for more info on that, you can email sales or you can email support, and we'll get you where you need to
go. Speaking of, the capabilities of the machine and photos on something, this is just a piece of granite with a doggy photo. Can you see that all right?
Yep.
So the capabilities are there, even with 130 watt, to get very, very good fine detail as well.
That tends to be a question I get asked all the time, is can 130 watt machines get fine detail like the lower wattage machines? And who I point to is Chris. I have 100 watt that I use here at our location, and I can do pretty good at photos. Chris has 130 watt, and he can do way better than me at photos. So it tells me that it's about the user and how you understand the machine and the software more than it is about the wattage. Now, the wattage can play a factor on certain materials, but the better you understand your machine and the settings and how to tweak photos in Lightroom, the better off your end product will be, regardless of what tube you have.
All right. I'm just making sure that I have my file in here. I'm sorry you can't see me off to the sides, more focused on what we're doing.
Yeah, I think after we engrave this cup, we can do a walk around and show off the different features of the machine. We can look at the dual stage air assist again. We can look at autofocus, the control panel, and then the exhaust and things on the backside. Best way to keep from getting flashback while cutting. Do you need to elevate the item off of the honeycomb? I mean, elevating the material is one really good way to alleviate that. Also, if your settings are really dialed in, it can eliminate almost completely having flashback.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons we're getting flashback is because we're overpowering, we're going past the material. And in a lot of cases, we want to do that because we're using a little bit more power because we don't know if the wood has knots or other strains of material inside. So we want to overpower so we don't have to cut twice, or we're glassing the edges of the acrylic. But because of that overpower, it's hitting the honeycomb and bouncing off of the honeycomb and hitting the backside of your material. So really the best way to avoid it is dialing in those settings. But you know, if there's no other way to do it, then yes, elevating it or using the blade table, which leads to another feature that these have. Grant?
Sorry, I'm reading the questions. You might need to
No, no
continue
problem. So having the honeycomb is great for materials that you're setting down flat and engraving on. If you're cutting on things and you are getting flashback from the honeycomb, then maybe it's a good idea to use the blade table instead. So that's just taking the honeycomb out and using the blades that are underneath.
Yeah, so it's really easy to get to that too. You just open the front door, remove the honeycomb, and then there's a set of knife blade beds all across the bottom of where the honeycomb is. And you can remove the blades that are directly underneath where your material is going to be sitting. That way you don't have anything under. So when you're lasering through the material, it's not going to hit the bed or the knife blades or anything like that. It's just only cutting the material. The next question is, can the Nova 35 fit through a 36-inch doorway? All of our machines can fit through a standard 30-inch doorway. However, you're going to have to take the machine off of the base and then turn it on its back or vertically to get it through the door. I've done this now like 3 or 4 times. It's not a hard thing to do, but the machines are heavy. So I would recommend at least having 4 people doing the move. I also recommend hiring a moving company. That way the liability is on them and then you're not getting hurt if something happens. But yeah, all of them can fit through a standard 30-inch doorway, no problem. Done it several times. What safety considerations would be needed to have this in a high school classroom? Is eyewear necessary? Yes, I would wear safety glasses, no doubt. Also, like what we're doing here, running the machine with the lid open, we bypassed the sensor for the door. Don't allow for stuff like that to happen. The machine will not let you run a job with the lid being open unless you bypass. So there's a lot of safety features on the machine. There's the heat sensor, which Chris feels very strongly about. If you want to say something about that, Chris.
Yeah. You know, depending on the size of the machine, like this machine has 2 of these heat sensors. They are built onto the bottom, and they are heat sensors, so they will notice any significant change. So if there is flame up, it basically shuts the machine down. Well, it stops it from moving, so you're not continuing to create a fire. And it will also alarm, and it's a really obnoxious alarm. It did save me once when I ran out of air in my external compressor. I hear this buzzing going on, and I ran and I caught it, and it was just literally the nozzle hose had got a little bit burnt. But without that system, I would have been minus a house, not a nozzle.
I was going to say, is it one of those things where I need to ask you how you know?
Ask me how I know. Yes, I have done it before.
And more to that question, we have an article in our knowledge base that specifically speaks to safety and steps that you can take to make sure that your environment is as safe as possible. So I would definitely look into that. And like I said earlier, any questions, email sales at or support at, and we'll get the question answered. But eyewear, I would get eyewear for the students. There's also CO2 fire extinguishers. So something like that would be a good option. It's very rare that something goes wrong with the machine that is unsafe. The only time that I've really seen that happen has been when people leave the machine to doing its job. So if you start a job, like let's say acrylic, you leave the room, shut the door, and go cook dinner, don't do that.
Yeah. Yep, I've got a buddy that lost his entire shop because he thought it was okay to go inside and eat some pizza. Came back out and his whole shop was ablaze. Um, there are also features in Lightburn to create job notes or even machine notes. So it will send, or it'll actually have a pop-up. And I talk to a lot of and train a lot of schools and other high volume clients that have multiple users. And having these pop-ups in the software are very beneficial so that it notifies and reminds people of your processes, of your safety concerns, and maybe even the client's concerns about their file and how they want things run. Real quick, Grant, got a magic eraser with a little denatured alcohol on it. I'm just going to wipe it down and make it nice and shiny. I will take my microfiber cloth and kind of just wipe it down. And then we have a nice little fire Maltese on a nice water bottle.
There we go. Very cool. Okay, one of the questions that we got is what was your kerf setting for the acrylic, and then what did the edges look like of the cut?
The kerf setting, I believe, was 0.008. Well, let me confirm on that one. Yep, 0.008, and depending on what lens, depending on the material, depending on how much power you're using, will determine how much of the material is obliterated that you have to account for.
Yeah, it's not something that's just, this is what the kerf is. It depends, like Chris said, on the material, the speed and power that you're using, the type of lens that you're using, because the 2-inch lens beam size is different than the 4-inch or the 1.5 HR. So you have to kind of do some playing on your own. I wouldn't use Chris's setting as like the standard.
No, I mean, none of this stuff has a holy grail of settings, from the humidity in the wood or, stuff like that can change your day-to-day settings. So yeah, it's definitely a fine art, and it depends on the artist.
All right, so let's get to some features here. Let's look at autofocus and manual focus. Oh yeah, okay, you can do that real quick.
Sorry, we mentioned it, so I just wanted to show it.
Those lines underneath the bed, those are the knife blades.
Yep, and another feature on these that a lot of other companies don't have is this bed, or the honeycomb, is pinned. So a lot of them just rest in there and they're able to move. Well, this one is pinned in there.
Once you get it locked in.
So that it, well, yeah, once you move it into the pinholes, well, there's a tight tolerance so that it stays in position correctly.
Yeah, that's a little thing that you wouldn't know is annoying if you don't have what we have. So if you have a machine that doesn't have pins that lock into the bed frame, like Chris said, it'll shift around everywhere. So if you lean a little too much, it can move your item. Imagine that you put your material in there, you lined up exactly where you need to be, and you accidentally pushed the bed just a little bit. You got to realign your whole design.
Well,
Our honeycomb is locked in.
And having locked in honeycombs like that, you can be reliant on its positioning. So if you had jigs or you're constantly doing a repetitive job, you can actually mount the jig to the honeycomb and it's not going anywhere. You just turn it on in the morning and repeat your job.
Yep. So autofocus and manual focus. Chris, if you could kind of explain how the autofocus works, and maybe we can watch it.
Sure, absolutely. So on mine, the autofocus beam sensors are a little bit towards the first third of the backside of the system, and it's kind of like a garage door sensor where there is an optical beam going across, and once you break that plane or that beam, it will stop the machine. You do have to have your 2-inch head tuned to the Honeycomb, which I'm going to put it up a little bit just in case, because we did swap out lenses. But I can easily come into my menu system, hit the autofocus, which is our
Make sure you
first
put the
option.
material in the way.
Yeah, no, the material's there.
All right.
The autofocus is our first option. On a lot of other companies, you have to go down and cycle through. Ours is the first one because it's likely the first thing you're going to use. I hit OK or Enter, and it will raise up, and then it will catch either the bed or the material, and we have material in there. And again, like I said, I don't have this tuned because we swapped them out and we were doing a cup. But if it was tuned, then this would be the correct distance from the material.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then manual focus. What is manual focus and how do you do it?
Manual focus, you will receive a little focus tool like this, and for that we are measuring the distance, and with the 2-inch lens it's about 5 to 6 millimeters away from the material. And what we could do is just drop it down, and you can see now I'm at 5 millimeters away and I'm focused in. That's the extent of it. And if I had the 4-inch head, then it's at 10 millimeters, and we literally just measure it there. And again, it's a sweet system where we can move this up and down to be able to dial it in quickly. But manual focus is as quick, if not quicker, than the autofocus.
And there's certain jobs where you'd want to use manual focus over autofocus, in my opinion. I prefer to use manual focus when I'm doing a tumbler. I'd hate to not have the rotary sitting in the right spot and use autofocus and then something bad happens. So I would rather use manual focus on a cup. Really anything that's not flat, my opinion is I use manual focus, but everybody's a little bit different. Another question I see here is, why are there high air and low air settings? Why is that an option? Well, low air is best for engraving, whereas high air is best for cutting. The reason why low air is best for engraving is, imagine you have a piece of wood and you're engraving the wood. Well, smoke is going to be generated from you burning the wood, and having low air means that it's not going to forcibly push all that air back into the material, causing you to have to clean it up. Imagine if you only had a high air setting, that smoke that comes up, your laser and your air assist is going to blow really hard and push that back into the material, causing you to clean it, sand it, and maybe alter the way that the whole job comes out. Whereas with cutting, the more airflow you have, usually the better the edges look. They can be less charred. It almost acts like a little extra kick and power.
Yeah, I mean, with the high air, we are putting that flame out as soon as it starts. I mean, we're cutting things with a beam of light. So the quicker we can extinguish that flame, the less charring we're going to get on our edges. And having a high volume and a low volume gives you the best of both worlds. You know, like Grant said, we want to engrave with very little air, so we're not pushing that debris and soot all over our work, giving us more work to do when we're done. The last thing you want is more work. I mean, we're trying to be profitable. We're trying to make money with this thing. You know, and clean engravings, clean cuts, and less cleaning afterwards is where we're at, what our philosophy is.
Do these machines ship fully insured just in case something happens during delivery? Yes. Yes, they are insured. So Chris, let's look at, can you do a walk around?
Yeah, the best that I can. I can pull it out a little bit, but let's see, let me close this down. Now, usually there is a louvered door. Oops, I have a pen stuck in here, hold on. Usually there's a louvered door, but we do have a pass-through on this machine, and what you do is you take out this louvered door, and there's also a panel in the back where you can pass sheets of wood through.
Yeah, and on the Nova 51 and 63, you can fit a 4x8 sheet through the pass-through. That's a really big selling point because a lot of people are having to cut down their material with a saw, or maybe having Home Depot or Lowe's cut it down for them. Well, if you get a 51 or 63, you can cut all your 4x8 sheets down in your laser machine.
I'm going to pull my table back a little bit so I can scoot out the... Now, you would think that this tank of a machine would be very difficult to move, but when it's on its wheels and on its rollers, there's really not much to it.
Do you have suggestions or videos on videos, channels, etc., to watch for learning how to account for odd-shaped glasses and tumblers? Actually, Chris's channel, he's got some videos on there. I mean, we have our own videos that we've produced in our Thunder Academy. So if you go to our website and click on resources, you'll see a drop down that says Training Academy, Knowledge Base, and I think reviews maybe or parts. Click on either Knowledge Base or Thunder Academy, and you'll have a lot of info on both platforms showing you how to use the Rotary and whatnot. But some other YouTube channels to watch would be Things Katie Makes, Simply Sally, Computer Creations. There's tons of them. If you just Google Thunder Laser Rotary, or not Google, if you go to YouTube and look up Thunder Laser Rotary, you'll find just about every video there is out there about how to use the Rotary.
Do you want to show our wiring and all that stuff? All right.
Really big differentiator between us and the competitors. Chris has used several different brand laser machines before, so you can kind of speak to why this is important and how it's different.
Yeah, I mean, all of these machines, unless you get into the $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 machines, it's the end user that's responsible for maintaining and repairing. And being able to have easy access and things labeled is important. Every single wire is labeled, and we have schematics for all of this stuff available to you, the end user, so that not only can we help you, but you can also locate things on your own. Having something this neat and organized is unknown in this industry, really.
It's very easy to overlook something like this, but I have several machines that I've worked with in the past, down to the lowest price range, and even some that are a little more expensive than us, and not one of them has looked this detailed and organized. If you have a problem with the machine, which is inevitable because it's a machine, having a labeled and organized wiring diagram makes it to where support can easily help you. You can understand exactly what they're telling you to do. Imagine if all this was jumbled in there and there was no labels and you had a problem. It'd be nearly impossible to solve that problem, at least efficiently.
Yeah, and then, you know, something like our TL timer down here, being able to cycle through and test your systems. You know, all of our peripheral systems are controlled through this timer. You know, trigger our red light, trigger our air assist, our exhaust fan, our high and low volume air, and there's that alarm I was talking about coming from our stack light. So if you did have a fire, it would actually set it off. And this is where you would change times and durations for the fan being on for an extended period of time to clean out any fumes, and the air assist.
All right, if you could show the back side so we can see the exhaust.
Yep, my exhaust is a little different. I have an upgraded 10-inch exhaust fan, unlike what comes with it. But the exhaust is coming out the middle side, and then right above it is our tube. And there's some things to note about the tube as well. Our perches are all aluminum. There's no plastic involved in that. Even our mirror assembly with our combining lens, it's all aluminum, high quality, and they are adjustable for, you know, alignment of the tube, alignment of the lenses. You know, it's just there was a lot of thought put into the longevity of a machine like this.
All right. So I saw somebody ask some questions about tubes and where to purchase them from. If you go to our website, click on resources, and then there's a drop down that has parts there. All of our parts that we offer are going to be on the parts website.
I guess
Okay,
it is
another thing to
probably a good
show.
idea to note that if you're using the accessories that comes with the machine, your exhaust fan, your air pump, everything plugs into the back. So there's not multiple outlets being used. It's one 20 amp circuit for a machine like this. Um, everything plugs into the machine and controlled by the machine.
Somebody asked, how do you clean a photo that you've engraved on wood?
Light sanding. I'm not sure if that's what they're asking.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, light sanding, depending on how deep they went. There shouldn't be
Somebody
much
also
cleaning.
asked, is the chiller built in? So that white box that you're seeing on the back of Chris's machine, that's the chiller. We've decided that we don't want to build the chiller, exhaust fan, or air compressor into the Nova Series machines. We've just found that the more components you jam pack inside the back of a machine, the harder it is to get in there and maintenance and clean the machine. So you're better off having it external. And if you wanted to make an upgrade or what have you, it's way easier to do that when those parts are external from the machine.
Well, and this is an active chiller. It is constantly maintaining temperature, and that's different over some of the competitors where they either have a bucket with water, or just an inactive chiller that is just cycling the water through a radiator. This is keeping the chiller or the tube at a certain temperature, which means constant and efficient work. One example where I had one that did not have a chiller, I paused it because I needed to go get some paint from Lowe's, and I came back and my engraving was 2 times as dark because the tube had time to cool. Well, that's not really an issue with something that is maintaining the temperature all the time.
Another question is about air assist. So upgrading your air compressor and why that's necessary or not necessary, but why is that done by a large majority of people?
Um, Cutting thicker materials, you want to be as efficient as possible with cooling and also putting out that flame. You have to go slower. And again, we're cutting with a beam of light. The more air pressure we have to put that flame out, the better the capabilities are to get it through the material and to keep the edge cleaner when you do cut it.
All right. Somebody asked if we could speak to what a ramp test is and then why it's relevant.
Ramp test, the lenses are glass or crystal that are ground down. Um, and there's variations. Like even our lenses, there's a variation or a tolerance that is between 4.5 millimeters and 6
Scoot over a
millimeters,
little
somewhere
bit,
in
Chris.
between it. Huh?
Scoot over a little bit.
You just see my legs?
No.
I didn't shave them today, so. So there's a sweet spot. Can you see me now?
Yep.
Okay. There's a sweet spot to the lens where you're getting the finest dot, and maybe that doesn't matter to most people. It depends on what you're doing. If you're doing a photo where every single dot matters, you're going to want to find that smallest dot. But usually, what we cut the distance or the variable in half, and we're using like 5 to 6 millimeters. That's usually perfect for anybody. Like I said, if you're going the extra mile and getting the most out of your photos or something like that, we want the smallest dot, and that's when a ramp test is important.
Okay. We're kind of getting down to the very last few questions here. Will you have a larger model bolt? Like Chris Meyer said here, the larger model bolt is the Odin. I mean, the bolt is basically a baby Odin.
Yep.
And some people have been asking me through email, will we be doing this same thing about the Aurora or about the Bolt? Possibly. This is our first test of doing a live demo to kind of just see how it works. Does it flow the way that we would like? Are we getting questions that are worth your time and worth our time to sit on here and share? And I think so far my answer is yes. I think this has been very helpful for those of you who have the questions. So yeah, I can foresee us doing this on the Bolt and on the Aurora. Let me see if there's any more questions. How often should the water be changed? We already talked about that. All right, well, I guess we can speak to lead times a little bit. So currently, the lead time on a Nova Series machine is about 2 to 3 weeks. Sometimes we get it to you a little quicker, but we're going to say 2 to 3 to stay on the conservative side. If you have questions, if you're a customer and you have questions about how the machine runs or any problems that you have, email support@thunderlaserusa.com. If you're somebody who doesn't currently, if you don't currently own a laser machine from us, and you have some questions about which one would be right for you, or how some things work, that sort of thing, then sales team, the sales email would be the way to go. So sales@thunderlaserusa.com. Also on our website, you can schedule a sales call, block out 30 minutes of your day to speak one-on-one with one of our sales reps so they can best suit you for the machine of your needs.
And there's some complaints about that, and I just want to speak to that. It's important to you're making an investment, and kind of like finding out the features of a car when you go to a dealership, and getting accessories. You may think that you need certain things, and our knowledgeable sales staff will really ask you some pointed questions to find out what you do and don't need. We're not trying to oversell you on stuff that, maybe you're never ever going to cut thick material and you don't need a 4-inch lens. Well, there's no need to spend that money to buy it. But maybe you do need a rotary and you haven't even considered that. So talking with somebody and really getting the fine details and not being oversold is huge.
Yeah, good point, Chris. I mean, you could email the sales email and ask for a quote. We can send you the quote and you can click and order the machine. But to Chris's point, you never know what you don't know. You may be buying a machine that you think works for X, Y, or Z thing, and it may not. You may have a need that you think the machine can do and it just can't. So it's way better to get on the phone with us and let us walk through the questions that you have, the things that you're wanting to do, so that we can align those with the machine that works best for that job. Another thing to consider is you may be looking at price tag or size of machine or space requirements. I can't tell you how many times I've had customers buy the cheaper machine, the smaller machine, just because it satisfies their needs of today, just to have them 6 months or a year later be like, dang it, I wish I would have got the bigger one. Do y'all have a trade-in program? Can I sell this one to y'all and buy a new one? Get the biggest one that you can afford and have space for from the beginning. That way you're not outgrowing your machine. You want to be able to grow into it and not outgrow it.
I did that with my first machine. 6 months later, I needed a larger one.
Okay. A lot of questions about edges on acrylic. Can you touch on it one more time?
Yeah. So on the edges on acrylic, we're trying to flame polish is what it used to be called when you would actually take a blowtorch to it. So you're flame polishing the edge. That requires a lot of heat. So we're usually running a little bit more power than it takes to get the cut through the material. We are also using as little air assist as not to create a fire, so that there's heat there. The idea of the high volume air assist is to put out the fire as fast as possible, well, in this case with acrylic, we want heat. So going slower on acrylic, using a little bit more power, and fine-tuning the air, which is great that we can do it right on the outside of the machine, is huge to getting the best possible result.
And I kind of want to go through some of the things that we talked about at the beginning. So what the Nova Series machine is, who it's best for. So the Nova Series machines are our CO2 laser machines. You'll notice that the head design with the Nova is different than that of the Odin or the Bolt. The head design of the Nova is really thought about with cutting. So you'll see it's a more elongated head, and the air assist comes directly out of the nozzle. Whereas on like the Odin or the Bolt, it kind of comes at an angle. So the Odin and the Bolt are more designed for engraving, whereas the Nova is a little more designed for cutting. However, one mistake people make is they think that the Nova is only for cutting, or the Bolt or Odin is only for engraving, and that's not true. They both can do both things. And my opinion, from using all the different machines that we offer, is the Nova Series machine is the most versatile. It's the one that you'd want to start off with if you're running a business. The Bolt is a really good beginner machine. But again, to go back to the point that I was making earlier, you don't want to get the cheaper option or the smaller option just because of the things that you want to do today. Think about what things you want to be able to do. You'd hate to get a Bolt or a Nova 24 and then a customer walks in and say, hey, can you cut me a 4x8 sheet of for a sign? And you have to say no. So just things to consider. Who is the Nova Series best for? Like I was saying, anybody who wants to start a laser business. A CO2 laser is the most versatile. You'll see that a lot of people who own a Nova or a Bolt or an Odin end up getting a fiber laser afterwards. But in my opinion, unless you have a specific need for engraving metal, a CO2 laser is the way to go.
I will say that this rail system and the head design that we have on all of our machines is far less maintenance than the standard, I guess, CNC slash laser machine. Not a lot of oiling involved. You know, we're wiping these downs and maybe re-oiling them occasionally, as opposed to, I mean, the near guide rails, you're oiling those. It was weekly for me when I had that style. A lot of maintenance on these. There's very little.
Somebody asked, I have a Nova 51 130 watt. I want to be able to engrave on a cutting board. Do I need to refocus? I've seen that on some of the YouTube videos. Not necessarily. I mean, you could definitely do a ramp test like we talked about earlier, but 6 millimeters should get you in the ballpark. Yeah, there's not a whole lot to it. Speed and power, I generally run about 500 millimeters a second on a cutting board. Power will vary depending on how deep I want to go, but 500 millimeters a second and 30 to 40% power may be a good starting point.
Running material tests, an engraved material test is huge because engraving is really the end user and also your client's choice. It's a preference. It is not. There's no set in stone. I guess power level or speed level. It is all depending on the outcome that you want.
Yep, and we're getting close to the end here. Any last minute questions, please feel free to shoot them our way. Questions about 3D relief engravings on our Nova Series machines, how that works. You use threshold, right?
3D relief engravings are going to be grayscale. You can use grayscale, but you can also do it with like a Jarvis or a halftone. It's just going over the same spot a few times. Being delicate with it and doing it a few times as opposed to trying to remove all that material at once will leave more detail behind, as opposed to obliterating it by using that extra power and going over it.
That's a good point. So when you're doing a 3D engraving and you do 2 or 3 passes, are you focusing closer to the material as you do another pass, or are you just staying exactly where you're at from the beginning?
Depends on the depth that you want. Once you start exceeding the capabilities of that lens, the depth of field of the lens, you may have to. For the most part, if you're doing it on wood and stuff like that, you don't really have to change your focal distance. There's enough compensation in the lens.
How I've learned to clean a 3D engrave on like wood is I just get warm water and a toothbrush and I scrub it. Chris may have a different opinion, but that's always worked well for me. It's been like zero charring around it afterwards. Because you got to think, when you're doing a 3D relief engraving, you're using a lot of power, you're going slower on the speed and doing multiple passes. So you're really burning the crap out of the material. So there's going to be soot and some char buildup. And like I said, warm water and a toothbrush or a brush of some sort has worked best for me.
Yeah, I mean, light sanding, sometimes I'll use a wire brush to kind of just get out some of that charring. But a light sanding usually just makes the top side engraving pop.
Do you have any
that contrast
engravings around?
I could have swore I brought them all to you, but I could be wrong.
I do have some of them.
I could be wrong.
No, I think you're right. There's some of them in the demo room.
If you have the lion head, then that's...
Okay, no worries. Well, we're at the end here. Let me see if there's one more question we can answer. My laser's in my garage. Do I need to be concerned about minimum and maximum temps throughout the seasons? Yes. What I tell my customers is that as long as you can keep the temperature at around 40 degrees or above, you should be okay. But there's still some steps that I would take. If you could climate control the environment, that would be ideal. Also, putting a blast gate on the end of your exhaust is a really good idea. So even if your space is 70 degrees on the inside, but imagine it's like 0 degrees outside, well, if you don't have a blast gate and cold air is getting in through the exhaust, it could still freeze your tube, which leads me to the bigger point. The main reason why you need to be concerned about temps is that the tube that Chris showed us earlier is a glass tube and it's cooled by water. So if that water that's circulating through the laser tube freezes, it can crack the tube and you'll have to get a new one. Very cool.
Now, while this is simulated somewhat, there is some varying depths to this. And this was just a halftone that was engraved pretty slowly, just so we could remove some of that material where the shadowing is.
Anything you want to add about the temp requirements?
There's a lot of people that are really, really highly concerned about the humidity. I can say that I've been operating these machines in Florida in an untemperature controlled environment for a long time, and I don't have any rust on it. You know, I now have temperature control, which is great for me, but the biggest concern is going to be freezing as opposed to heat and humidity. Obviously, we want the tube to be efficient, and it's more powerful and more consistent when it is chilled to the temperatures that it's set to in the chiller. But if you're in Florida or other places where you have crazy humidity and stuff like that, these machines can tolerate a lot of different temperatures.
Yeah, so I was saying earlier, the things that I would rather you do is climate control your space, insulate your space. At the minimum, keep the ambient temperature at 40 degrees or above. But you can also put RV antifreeze into the chiller. We've got an article on this whole situation in our knowledge base. So go to the knowledge base and type up freezing or temperature. If you don't find what you're looking for, you can always email support and they'll get you in the right direction. What's the best method for cleaning of leatherette? I've always used LA Awesome and just a towel to clean it off. There might be a better way. That's what's worked for me.
Yeah, I use a lot of denatured alcohol for a lot of it. It's harsh enough to clean things, but gentle enough not to remove paints and other materials.
And then if it's humid in your space, I've just always heard to leave your lid open. So if there's any moisture collected inside the machine, it can escape with the lid being open. All right. Well, I think we're at the end here. We're a little past an hour. Chris, I appreciate you being my circus monkey and doing everything I've needed you to do. And thank everybody for joining in. We will probably do one of these again, either on the Nova, Bolt, or Odin. So thank you guys. And that's it. Have a good day.
See ya.